And welcome here in Marseille. My name is Shimon Yaguewo. I am the Brussels correspondent of the magazine Forbes Afrique. I will have the pleasure of moderating this debate in the Talking Africa-Europe series here in the framework of the Emerging Valley Conference about a very, perhaps I would say, a very important topic, which is pandemic preparedness and the future of health, is it digital, in partnership with the Africa-Europe Foundation. So, as you may know, Africa and Europe race to implement the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and Agenda 2063, taking much needed steps to regain the progress that has been lost due to the COVID that we know, the shortage of healthcare workers, vaccine inequality, along with an unprecedented strain of health system that has triggered, nonetheless, an accelerated opportunity for digital healthcare solution as to bridge the gap between healthcare and those it serves. To put it in perspective with some numbers, the healthcare market, the Europe's one, is estimated to grow fourfold. And in Africa, by 2030, the health market is estimated to be at 2059 billions of USD, which will constitute the second largest global market after the United States. So how the European and African collaboration actually contribute to harness this opportunity? What are the challenges? How to overcome those obstacles? This is among the questions we're going to tackle in this special panel with four prominent guests, which I will introduce to you. I will start by Madame Sarah Ben Slimane, founder of Cognito in Tunisia. Hello.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm pleased and honored to be here with you today. I'm Sarah Ben Slimane, CTO and co-founder of Cognition Tunisia.
We are welcome. I would like just to introduce, if I may, the other panelists as well, but afterwards you will have the floor, of course. So the second panelist here is Madame Sausen Ayari, who is the co-founder and CEO of AI Diagnosis in Tunisia as well.
Oh, hello, everyone. My name is Sausen Ayari. I'm from Tunisia. And I'm the CEO and co-founder of AI Diagnosis Vision.
Thank you for being with us. I've also Mr. Pablo Ruiz Musquiz, who is the CEO and co-founder at Quels, but particularly an initiator of Ferena la Cordova, or Flatten the Curve. Welcome here.
Exactly. Thank you very much for having me. Coming from Spain, and it's I'm not going to talk about my company, but about that project called Ferena la Cordova, Flatten the Curve. Yes.
And we look forward to your insights about that. Last but not least, Dr. Youssef Travali, Senior Fellow at Friends of Europe and CEO of All Sides Africa. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Very happy to be here today.
So before maybe we dive into the subject directly, Dr. Travali, I had the opportunity to read some of your analysis. And one number struck my attention. The number of startups active in the health tech space on the continent has grown by 56.5% in the last 3 years. So my question would be to you, could you please shed some light on how technology and innovation contributed to facing the health threat posed by COVID-19 pandemic in Africa?
Wow, it's a broad question. Huh? So I think what I can say is that the pandemic has really raised awareness on the potential of e-health to fight the pandemic. And most importantly, it has raised the importance of science, technology, and innovation going forwards. So I think there are a number of examples. I was just a few minutes ago in a panel on e-health, where we saw a very good example, like Zipline, who managed to scale across several countries following the pandemic and to really expand their product portfolio. So at the very beginning, they were just using drone to deliver blood, and then they start using drone to deliver essential medication, and then to use drone to deliver vaccine, and so on and so forth. So we have seen this, also the importance of telemedicine has been raised during the pandemic. So we understood that it was really essential to be able to do a teleconsultation. And then, last but not least, we have seen quite some emergence of the need to understand data and to harness data and to harness AI and the potential of AI for prevention. So I think those are the elements which is really pushing the healthcare startup. And today, I think 1 or 2 years ago, the healthcare sector was really the third sector in terms of attracting funding. But I can predict that within the next 5 years, probably the healthcare sector, so it was behind fintech and cleantech, But I'm expecting that within the next 5 years, the healthcare sector will probably attract much more than that.
But I think what you are saying is actually true, because in Uganda I could spot it that actually fintech was the first sector in which investment were going, and with the pandemic actually it had the healthcare sector now. I think the Uganda example actually confirms what you are saying, and within the next years we will certainly see a growing number of investments in that particular sector. So we're talking about Zeppelin, one example. We have two here from Tunisia. I would like to start with you, Sarah. Could you please explain what is your business? In which particular sector of health are you involved and why?
Okay, so we have a project, eHealth.in. It's a web-based platform, cloud-based platform lining up multiple CADs in a row to early stage detection, very different diseases. We are treating cancer and Alzheimer. So we have 4 CADs. One for breast cancer early stage detection. It's the #1 cause of death within women globally. Also, there is also need of melanoma skin cancer detection. Also, the Alzheimer disease need to be predicted and detected at a very early stage to ensure the patient's life expectancy. And we do the 3D reconstruction of lungs, and after that, the classification of pneumonia.
Thank you very much. The same question up to you.
Okay, so our solution, it's a platform, it's AI-based platform, and we are working in analyzing X-ray. So our solution can create an X-ray report. Today we have an accuracy rate of 92%, and it's instantly you'll have directly a result. So today we are working in 20 classes of pathologies. We are detecting common pathologies, but also complex pathologies. Yes.
So here we heard about innovations taking place in Africa, and what makes you special, perhaps here, Pablo, it's the fact that you actually triggered a new Africa collaboration with your initiative, Ferena la Cordova platform, because you are cooperating with, I think, a platform based in Kenya. Could you please tell more about this?
Yes, this is a different angle, I think, to e-health. I'm not an e-health expert myself. I'm sorry if I made some mistakes. The Ferena la Cordova, or Flatten the Curve initiative that was born in Spain and then spread across 20 countries, many of them in Latin America because of the natural bonds that we have, was actually an interesting collaboration between Kenya and Spain through the Ushahidi project, the open source platform for mapping anything really, and the need in Spain during the first weeks of strict lockdown to actually map vulnerable people, volunteers, public services, proxies, which were what we call the orange pins, people that would ask for help on behalf of vulnerable people. And this was very successful. There's some ingredients of why we were so successful and had thousands of pins by mid-March in 2020, but I probably will cover that later. But that's not an e-health company. It's just a citizen-driven initiative with some public institution support that gave some trust to the project. But then how important was to take innovation already happening in Kenya, bring it to Europe, help improve the platform and expand it globally.
Yeah, but I could see that you grew up, so fast. You actually expanded beyond Spain in dozens of countries, including Poland, in the country of my origin. So what are the ingredients that makes this so successful? And at the same time, what are the eventual obstacles you have encountered?
Well, I think I have to be honest, some things just happen by chance. But in this case, I'd say we bought us some time. This is not fancy technology, I'm sorry, but this is basically people understanding that doing the narrative in media during the first days of lockdown, where people were encouraged to, get the most out of the time in houses, and do some gym online and all that, some people were actually concerned that we would get exhausted and would be feeling, the issues of a strict lockdown and vulnerable people not being able to just go to the pharmacy, for instance. So I think timing was key to get a volunteer network, so that when vulnerable people or proxies went to the map, to the whole Spain map, it would already be covered by green pins, So they would actually be able to zoom in, look for the neighborhood, and find enough green pins for them to not necessarily put a red pin for them, but to ask for help. The second, the major success factor in terms of technology was finding Ushahidi. When you are a technologist, you want to just do technology. If you're a baker, you will throw, baking stuff to whatever challenge you have. You help in any way you can. If you develop software, that's what we want to do. You want to prove yourself worthy and just give away your expertise. We as technologists sometimes need to stop and just partner with all the technologies that already exist. And this was the case with Ushahidi. And I think one of the major drivers for this success was to be humble and look for all the solutions, find the best one, which was by far Ushahidi, and then adapt it and expand it in no time.
And you have encountered no obstacles?
Oh, well, yeah, there were many obstacles. Again, in terms of people...
If you could say maybe one.
Yeah, well, I think the major obstacles when you're expanding globally, when you are sort of, let's say, quote-unquote, enjoying your success in Spain, you would never want to enjoy such a thing, but you know what I'm saying. You go to your, brother countries like Argentina, Chile, Brazil, Colombia, and you say, look, it's going to hit you hard. Yeah. We come from your future, right? You have 2 weeks that we didn't have. The major obstacle was not replicating the technology that will be done in an hour, but to actually make sure that the people in those countries would accept help that they didn't think was necessary because they were not suffering from the pandemic. So now this is like an old story, and everyone knows this is global, but March 2020, this was a European problem. First was the Chinese, then European. America was not thinking it would actually hit them hard. So obstacles actually was a people's problem in a way, yeah, right. And I'm afraid it could happen again.
Hopefully not, but unfortunately, as we see, it happened again. We are witnessing, unfortunately, a new wave of a pandemic. So we're talking about obstacles, and I would like to come back to Africa with you, Dr. Travali. Among the obstacles, I could understand that for you, data infrastructure represents a challenge within the Africa context and the healthcare and IE development.
Yes, absolutely. But maybe before answering your question directly, I want to probably explain how we came up to that conclusion, which is actually an important step. And it really brings me back to what the Africa-Europe Foundation is really. And actually, the Africa-Europe Foundation is a multi-stakeholder platform, or a platform of platform, with several instruments. We have the high-level group of personality, we have a women leader network, and we have a digital strategy. We have strategy groups, and also the Debating Africa instrument. So basically, the strategy group, we have 5 strategy groups. So one is on health, transport and connectivity, energy, agriculture, and food security, and the last one on digital, which is the one I am actually leading. So this digital strategy group, so basically the foundation exists for already 1 year. It has been founded by Friends of Europe in collaboration and Mo Ibrahim Foundation in partnership with One Campaign and the African Climate Foundation. Now, one of the things that we did over the last year is with a very inclusive strategy group on digital, we're reflecting on how digital can really transform the Africa-Europe partnership. During that work, I think we came up with really 5 main challenges. One is really ethic and governance. I think it's an important aspect for you too, working on AI, to really consider the aspect of ethic and governance. The second aspect is really data infrastructure and governance, as you mentioned. And as Pablo mentioned, when you want to expand beyond border, you want to go expand across the continent and beyond the continent, one important aspect is access to data. So one thing that we are pushing is really to have a kind of, this is one of the challenges, is interoperability, interoperability, data sharing, and data governance. That's one important aspect. The third challenge that we came up with is really health financing, and then digital inclusion and biases. In the case of AI, again, it's a very important aspect. And then the last one is underdeveloped policy framework. So when, if I have to explain a bit more about data infrastructure, if you are familiar with the healthcare system in Africa, it's a pyramidal healthcare system, going from health post, health center, hospitals, district hospitals, and so on. So you need to have interoperability across the layer, but you also need to have interoperability in between the layers. And this is one of the main challenges we are facing. And also when you talk about data governance, you'll be collecting data from people. So how do you explain them the importance of what you are collecting, and to make sure that they understand what they are signing for, that they are not signing because you have a white shirt because you are a doctor. Those are important aspects.
But continuing in this data infrastructure challenge, I think you mentioned a great example you shared with me before the panel,
Yes.
in which actually somehow hampered the development of a product of your solutions, indeed.
Yes. In order to develop our solution, we will need a lot of data. But in Tunisia, we are not very aware of the importance of the data. I will tell you a story. Once we are collaborating with different public and private sectors to collect data. So once visiting a private sector, I've asked them, if your cloud is full, what do you do with the data? They told me, we raise it. So it's...
Interesting. That's why I think it was a very interesting
Yes.
example, the concrete one.
They are not aware of that the data is the new gold, and we should invest in data, collect it in a store, in a cloud, and give it, for example, to a researcher. As I'm a researcher in neural network, I have access to international data, but I don't have access to Indonesian data. That's it.
Yeah, and this is why I think to stress that point, and with this example was actually glamoring and actually struck me when we talked before this panel, and reinforce what Dr. Travali actually mentioned about this challenge in relation not only to data infrastructure, but he well presented health investments, ethics. And about ethics, do you think that is a really big challenge in the African context, Pablo? And how? Les aléas du direct.
Let's see. Okay. Merci beaucoup. There's some feedback coming on. I mean,
maybe if we can.
Yeah, something like that.
No, or maybe you can share the mic. No, okay.
No, we shouldn't do that. Ethics. The reason we chose Ujahiri actually was one of the reasons it was because it was open source, and that meant full transparency, and that meant that every protocol that we enforced for Ferena la Cordova, this initiative, was trustworthy. Actually, if it wasn't for that, we had probably not started the project, because super advanced technologies were ready for us. Who doesn't have a map technology out there these days, right? That you can mash up with any sort of data. But ethics was the driving force, and this open source, transparent, easy to use, easy to adopt technology called Ujahiri meant that we could enforce protocols that would be privacy first driven, and therefore be able to expand this into a set of public servants that would help us, citizens, everyone trusting a platform. But we had to trust what we were doing in the first place. I think ethics, if you get the ratio between technology and ethics, there's a lot of technology, there's little ethics. I'd like to have that ratio go up somehow. Technology is not neutral. No, c'est un faux adage that technology is neutral. It's not neutral. Technology that exists, technology that doesn't exist, there's an agenda there. And so let's not forget that. And let's make sure that we don't have a super, problematic ratio there, particularly in e-health.
This is what I say. About health financing, I think you had an interest. Oh, this is the technical issue. About health financing, I think you had a very interesting issue. Why investors are not that willing to invest maybe in the healthcare sector? What here are the obstacles from their point of view?
Today, I think investors are still very skeptic in investing in e-health startups, and they prefer to go into startups that are not so complex. They don't need, in terms of regulations, enough of complexity and other things. So I also think that research needs a lot of money, and e-health startup need to raise a lot of capital, and it can be a successful one. And
the time issue could be also another element to take into account?
Yes, because it's very risky startups. And yes, I think because today for us, for example, we raised our first fundraising, but it's very hard to raise another one. So because we need a lot of money for research and R&Ds, and we need a lot of money for regulations. And it's very skeptic for investors today.
Okay. Dr. Chavali, here expertise. How long does it take, according to you, to implement from lab to market? How long does it take? Because she talks about the time, and I think it's a very important aspect to take into account.
Okay, that's a very good point. It depends now on the type of partnership you put in place. I would say in 20,000, in 20,000, I would have said it takes 20 years to go from lab to
20
market.
years.
Yes, in 20,000. I think today you can go from lab to market in less than 2 years with the right policy, with the right partnership. And I think this is where we really need to go, because in the lab to market process, there is the ideation process or the R&D process, and then the pilot phase, which today you can piggyback on what is being done somewhere else. And then there is the pilot or demonstration phase where you pilot your technology, you scale the technology, which you can do in a certain market, depending that you have the right policy framework. Because what you mentioned, basically, is when you have an underdeveloped policy framework. Today, if we had an AI policy in all African countries, if we had a national NCD policy in all African countries, we could have deployed technology using AI to prevent NCDs in all those countries like this. The second important thing, we don't have today a framework to measure the readiness or the maturity of a country regarding AI technology or emerging technology. And we are, for instance, exploring this. And if you want to have a framework which enables you to measure the maturity of a country, you need to look at more than 200 indicators.
200
or more than 200 indicators, which means that it will take time to bring confidence to investor in those technologies that are quite disruptive.
So if I understand, one of the challenges you mentioned, there is an underdeveloped policy framework. But when I see at the report you mentioned made by the Africa Europe Foundation, I could see, and I quote here, according to the WHO, 42 out of 54 African countries have reported having a national e-health strategy. So why it constitutes still a challenge,
Absolutely.
according to you?
So the national AI strategy, the national e-health strategy, that's one step.
Okay.
Then you need to break down the strategy into smaller policies. You need to have a policy for ethics. You need to have a policy for AI. You need to have a policy for cybersecurity. You need to have a policy for data governance and data sharing. You need to have policy which is going to set direction for where the focus should be in terms of prevention. Over the next year, for instance. And that's an important aspect, because if there is a focus on where prevention should be going, I think the startups that are working in diagnostic and prevention, they will really understand what is the market and what is the size of the market. When a country, when a government tells you that I want to screen, 3 or 4 million people within the next 5 years, you can estimate the size of the market based on that, and it's a national policy.
It's based on a national policy.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So I think you share the point of view of Dr. Travali. How, from a startup perspective, this prevention prediction earlier would help you in developing a project within your sector? What is so important?
So it's so important to know the market size and where or what's the technology that you will use. For example, me as a researcher, I totally, for example, go out from traditional research and I've gone to entrepreneurship, because there is a new regulation in our country that pushing us to go to innovation because we have not enough money, so we will need to invest. We have a lot of potential, and so on. So in Africa, there is a lot of potential in AI
Without
and
a doubt,
health tech.
indeed.
We do the privacy also. We are protecting, we are developing an algorithm for the privacy of personal data, which is primordial for any technology. And we need the support. We need some fund, and we need to be to give us the chance to implement our technology and use it in the market. Because there is a reticence from a doctor. There is a reticence. There is no enough laws that regulate the use of AI. So we need, first of all, before searching for investors, we need to prepare the environment of this technology in
This
Africa.
one point to overcome the obstacles is to prepare the environment. Indeed. Do you have maybe other elements on how to actually overcome those barriers? Because you're talking about creating the environment.
Yes.
From your startup perspective, are there other elements to take into account?
So it's very essential to know to be accelerated. So the role of accelerator came here from a project, how we will scale up with our project and how we will go to market. So, for example, I'm a chief technical officer. I don't know so much about the business model and all of that. So, fortunately, I have been accelerated with accelerator, which is connecting of.
So if I understand, you are really talking about how to scale up environment is really one of the key issues.
Yes.
Dr. Travali, actually, how we can go further, how we can develop digital e-health solutions and the scale up for use, according to you. I think you had an interesting point about circular innovation, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, sure. I think one of the axes where the foundation is focusing, for instance, it's everything dealing with health manufacturing and vaccine production. And within that space, clearly there is an interest in focusing on prevention. But what is interesting is that before focusing on prevention in the healthcare space, we have been pushing for a vaccine manufacturing in Africa. So when you look at the example of vaccine manufacturing in Africa, it's a very interesting example because actually the patent or the research has been done here in Europe. And today we are really transferring the technology, we are transferring the skills, we are transferring the know-how, and we are even transferring the finance to African countries so that the vaccine manufacturing can be localized in Africa. And I think at some point in time when we'll start producing vaccine in Africa, we should be able to re-export those vaccines back in other part of the world. And I think this is a model that is very interesting, which is a circular innovation model where all the actors, they can find their way along this circular path. And it can be extended to other sectors. We have seen the example of Zipline or the example of Babylon in Rwanda, where you have this kind of circularity going from lab to market. So basically the lab to market process is no longer localized in one country. So it can be local. The research can happen in Europe or in Africa, and the innovation can happen in Europe or in Africa, and the scale up can happen, I don't know, in Asia or somewhere else. So that's a model which I think could help us rethink the partnership between the two continents.
You're talking about EU-Africa collaboration here,
Yes.
and here, Pablo, I will turn up to you. Based on your experience with Ferena la Cordova, what are the opportunities for collaboration and joint ventures between e-health ecosystem between Africa and Europe, according to you? Hello? Yeah, je crois que ça force.
Hello? Yeah, this is working. So, as I said, I'm not an expert in e-health, but what I learned about from Ferena la Cordova is that a key ingredient is lots of ambition, small egos. Okay, so again, a nice ratio there, and it's only fair. It's only fair that we did that, the right thing, but in a very pragmatic way. What I see in other sectors could be applied to e-health, which is just bringing new, powerful, and diverse voices to the table. And that means if you do that, whether you call it circular innovation or partnership or strategic thinking, what you get is that you nurture actual, sustainable, and more impactful innovation. So it's in your interest to do that. I'd say even if it was not in your interest, you should do that. That link between Europe and Africa definitely needs to happen. But if you go the pragmatic way, it's just smart to do that. I can speak from other sectors, how they work, not particularly in e-health, but what I learned from just technology alone during this initiative, Ferena la Cordova, which is fortunately over now, is that when you have different priorities balancing together, different perspectives at different times, if you do that, if you would see Kenya's priorities, Spain's priorities, and at some point you blend them, you get a stronger product, a stronger, in this case, a stronger open source solution, and more use cases to sort out in the future, which I think when we say innovation, sometimes you just want to be prepared for the future, right? That's what you want sometimes. And this is, I think, a key element in terms of resilience.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I've been told that we are slowly need to close this debate. The time flies, and I think it was a pretty interesting. You had pretty interesting point of view. You shared of the field, your expertise. Me, perhaps I would like to conclude this debate by giving my small contribution, and I would like to quote former Secretary General of the UN, Kofi Annan, because I share his point of view. It is my aspiration that health finally will be seen not as a blessing to be wished for, but as a human right to be fought for. Thank you very much, and I wish you a pleasant continue this conference. Thank you very much to you, all the experts. Thank you, and